Hello, welcome back, everyone. My name is Oyemika Limaat. Welcome to the Embody Lab One-Day Summit, Healing Trauma with EMDR and Applied Neuroscience. I'll be your host for today's session, Rediscovering Spontaneity, EMDR, Complex Trauma, and Play with Karee Powers. Again, to save time, I'm not going to read Carrie's bio. We're just going to put it into the chat, and you can just read along with what's in the chat, or you're more than welcome to Google her and get to learn a lot more about her. Okay. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Carrie. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I think everyone here is a brave soul because to come to a talk about spontaneity, it's a challenge, because it might be something that we're all trying to work towards, but can feel a little scary. So I thought we just kind of start in. I'm going to share my slides and get into it. One sec. Okay. All right, so what I thought we might do is start off with a warm up and just going in to kind of get the juices flowing. That's part of the work that we're going to be doing in terms of spontaneity today. And then we're going to talk more about spontaneity, what it means, how to develop it, why it's important. And we're going to do another warm up. We're going to discuss complex trauma and some of the limitations and benefits of EMDR with complex trauma. Then we might try to do another warm up. We'll see if we have time. And then we might try a psychodrama, which means roles that people can choose to play, and there can be a protagonist. And so I thought instead of lecturing about the brain, what if we just put it in action and people could play roles? So somebody can be an amygdala if they want to be an amygdala, or, however you want to do it. So, yeah, so let's get into it. And then after that, we're going to go into the benefits of play. So, all right. I think I'm going to just talk about spontaneity and then we'll go into warm up. So, why are we talking about spontaneity? Because it's present oriented. We're creating new neural networks and connections. We are establishing and observing mind. Um, there actually in research is an inverse relationship between anxiety and spontaneity, meaning that the higher a person's anxiety, less sense of spontaneity they have, which tells us a lot about what happens when people have trauma and maybe they can't move outside of their default settings. So this does change the brain. um, I think sometimes there's a procedural memory that's implicit where things just go really quickly inside when people have trauma. And so we can go from, um, feeling an intense emotion, body sensation to an action within seconds. And that's part of implicit memory. And so when we are able to access spontaneity, we can we have an opportunity to do something different in that moment. So we're trying to awaken possibility, curiosity, and maybe. Sometimes with trauma, you have a very kind of set way of looking at things, or we have a set way of looking at things when we've gone through trauma. And so it's hard to say, maybe sometimes it kind of gets locked into, oh, that obviously that's going to happen. That dangerous thing is going to happen. And so this is kind of like, well, maybe, I don't know. Possibilities are there. So, and I think part of the work in that we're all trying to do in terms of trauma healing is being able to feel connected and safe. And so I think being in that spontaneity can help us be in that sense of connection, upregulate that ventral vagal response. So, psychodrama believes that you cannot grow without spontaneity. It's an essential ingredient. At the same time, there is, in order to develop it, you need other elements. So this is the canon of creativity. This was created by Dr. Moreno, Jacob Moreno, in probably 100 years ago. He is the creator of psychodrama. And basically, we have this circle, and you have spontaneity, creativity, cultural conserve. So the cultural conserve is kind of where we start. It's like it's the default settings that I was talking about, the way we do things right now, right? And it could be well established from trauma. It could be just our normal way of being, right? And so ideally, we would warm up to something different, warm up, warm up. Sometimes we go around that circle a couple times until there might be a moment where we're warmed up enough, and then, oh, there's a spark, right? And so that spark of spontaneity can meet up with creativity and then create a completely new cultural conserve. So then you work with that cultural conserve until you're warmed up again to get into spontaneity again. And this is kind of what he believes is the mechanism of change. So there is a difference between spontaneity and impulsivity. So with spontaneity, we are trying to look towards what is finding these new ways of engaging that are in new situations, in old situations. We're present, we're embodied, we're in ventral safety and connection. We might have an attitude of curiosity. Impulsivity can be, just like I was saying, the compulsions of implicit memory, things that we did to try to survive. A lot of times they're not with an adult observing self, which mainly means that it's so from an old way of being that is just so concretely in there. It's often for survival, and sometimes it can threaten actual safety. Um, because some of these mechanisms, they're coming from a sense of maybe necessity or desperation to get some relief from uh, large feelings. So they, cutting, I'm thinking about in other ways that people have coped in order to get through these situations. So, all right. So, beyond the cultural conserve, to resolve childhood trauma and attachment failure, the theory suggests that cultivating new experiences in therapy may be more useful than talking about old experiences. Yeah. And so, one of the things that we're going to hopefully be able to practice today in psychodrama is um, this sense of, um, that we're in the present, and we're kind of creating a new experience, even when we're talking about the old experience. So, that being said, I would love to see if we could go into a warm up, and this is just a really just beginning intro level warm up, and see how this feels. So each person will just choose an item from your space, and something that maybe represents why you decided to attend this workshop. It could be about, representing your spontaneity or what spontaneity means to you. And just talk about the significance with whoever you're with, and we'll give it 2 minutes for each person. Mhm. Is anyone, just one person or two people would like to share what their experience was, talking to a stranger about, you know, just just that little bit of information. Yeah. Yeah. China.
Oh,
Hey,
I can mute. Hi, hello. I love your
Yes.
energy, Karen, and you're right, we are very brave. I only logged on for the last call and I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't really want to listen to this. I want to hang up. But anyway, but I love your energy. You've got a lovely I'll put my camera on. You've got a lovely kindness about you, and I love that.
That's
Um,
awesome.
we had a lovely group. It was that was very spontaneous, ending up in a breakout room, and I had a lovely
Yes.
group. But there were two parts, wasn't there, to what we had to do, and we couldn't remember the second part. What was?
Oh. So when we do the next ones, there's actually my PowerPoint is in the, yeah, so I'm glad it was spontaneous. Um and it sounds like if you go to the PowerPoint, the first warm up is the one that you did, and then we're going to do another one pretty soon that,
Oh,
might be a little bit different. So
oh,
we're going to build with each other. So you're going to stay in the
right,
same groups, which I think is going to be
right.
great.
So what
Yeah.
was the let's start now message we got at the top? Because we'd all introduced ourselves, all shown our objects, and then we got let's start now, and it's like, huh?
Yes. So it takes a little bit to get the warm-up rooms, the breakout rooms set up, but I think that we've got it down. So we know where everybody is going, and it should be a little bit smoother this next time, so we have a little bit more time. Does that sound good?
It sounds great, and what a pleasure. Thank you, dear. Thank you.
Yes. All right. All right. One more person before we go. All right. Let me see. Michelle? Michelle? I'm sorry. Hello?
This is Fazil. Somebody unmuted me.
Oh,
So
okay. I thought there was a um question or you had your hand raised.
so I think one thing we talked about was that there are many things that are trauma, but we might not be labeling them as trauma. For example, migration or racism or being Black in America and so on. And that those are, especially from a social worker's perspective, that these macro factors are very important. And secondly, I find it helpful to let the client know that there is although they've been through trauma, but there is that idea that I heard in another workshop of Embody Lab, that the path to go from PTSD to PTG, which is post-traumatic growth,
Oh,
that
yes, we're
kind
going
of
to be talking about that.
let them know that, okay, we're headed in this direction.
We are. We're going there. So let's go ahead back into it, and we will talk about all of that because I think we have some um towards the end of it, but we're going to go into that. Okay, awesome. So let me share my screen again. And okay, so just going to be brief about what is complex trauma. I have a feeling a lot of people already do know what it is, but just to define it in case someone is coming in, new to this. So complex trauma, it is a longer duration. A lot of the times it starts in childhood. It's when people have been living with years and years of trauma in an unstable environment. So, sometimes when people have PTSD, it can be from a single incident, but this can be from living in a condition that was unstable for a long period of time. And so, what Michelle was saying around it could be migration, it could be war that someone is living through, can create complex PTSD. Also, abuse and neglect can also be a factor there too. And so, one of the things that can be really um, shifting and what makes us approach complex PTSD differently than single incident PTSD is that a lot of people who are in this category, their brain is developing around their experience. And, under the age of 5, um, the implicit memory, procedural memory can encode quicker than episodic memory, which means that a person might have different expectations of danger that can be automatic, and what they do to deal with that can be just so quick in the mind. It can just be automatic. This is why I'm talking about this in particular, because the approach has to be a little different. um, so it's PTSD and um, affect, impulses changed, mood, attention, consciousness. And when we're talking about consciousness, it means, that there can be a possibility of, that dissociation is part of this too. Self-perception, shame comes up quite a bit with people who have complex PTSD. There's a perception of the perpetrator, perception of the world, their relationships. A lot of time, we're talking about interpersonal wounding, somatic symptoms that can come up with this, and the way that they make meaning of the world in general. So what I might consider dangerous, another person would say that is not, that's just, a yellow candle. It's not to me, it might be as dangerous as a lion, you know? All right. And then survivors learn how to survive using their sympathetic and dorsal reactions. And as implicit memories, as we were just talking about, arise, they will inform the mood, the somatic experience, the expectations, and the decision making that comes from there. So, all right. I think that if this were a longer time that we had, we would be talking about dissociation in parts a little bit more, but there's so much to discuss around that, so we won't get into that. So again, implicit memory, expectations of danger, shame and powerlessness, which is a coping strategy of dorsal. It's a way to, when you're a kid, you don't have a lot of power. Sometimes being, almost making yourself small can help you get through abusive and neglectful situations. So body memories. So sometimes people will have memories that just come up through like their stomach aching, and it could be, so quick. It could be one thing that kind of triggered it, and then this whole response might come. And sometimes people don't even consciously understand, and that's what implicit memory is. There's no sense of consciousness. You can't call on it. It's just happening. So there might be a sense of trying to make ourselves safe, and what we do to make ourselves safe, because it can feel like a desperation, can validate, so a person who says, people outdoors, they will hurt me physically. So in an attempt to keep themselves safe, they might say, okay, well, that means I just need to stay at home more. I need to not leave. I need to not go to the grocery store, right? And it can validate fears, right? Okay. Oops. It can also, there can be isolation, dysregulation in relationships. So there can be a push-pull, like there's a real big need to connect and a real big need to defend, because maybe for a lot of people who have developmental trauma, the person that they needed in their life, who was a source of care for them, was also dangerous. So they're still managing that in adult relationships. So difficulty staying and observing self. These memories can really take over, and again, they're without consciousness, so they can feel really hard to even describe sometimes. And I think anyone who attended the lecture before, I attended part of it, kind of knows that it's so important to develop that observing self when someone has complex trauma, because they may not even know when they are overwhelmed at times. So there can be overactive amygdala, underfunctioning frontal lobe, and hippocampus. So that amygdala, which is the, it is the smoke alarm. It starts to, be the one that says we are in danger almost all the time, because remember, they lived in danger for years, decades, right? And so when the amygdala is flashing, the frontal lobe kind of goes to sleep, is not functioning as well, which means, all of the things that help to kind of say, okay, that maybe logic and, being able to plan, all of those resources are just not as available. And the hippocampus also has a decreased size over time as well, because it's difficult to form long-term memories because things get kind of stuck in the amygdala space. Okay. All right, we have another warm-up and see how this feels. So what I'm just going to describe it and then see how this feels. So we're going to choose with your group. Individually, you're going to choose a word, body gesture, position that speaks to where you are right now, emotionally, somatically, like in the day you're in, and then put it into action. So put it into action might mean, maybe your movement is, and that can be just your movement, and just feel what that feels like in your body, and then the other group members can kind of mirror that back. So they might go, oh, like that, and see how that feels. So they have that empathy of the experience, if that makes sense. And then we're going to choose a word. After we've gone around on that one, choose a word, gesture, body position, movement that speaks to where you would like to be at the end of our session today. And then put that into action. Just feel the impact. And then the other group members can just mirror that for the other person. So they have that empathy of what that would feel like. Okay. And then finally, we're going to choose a word, gesture, body position. You can also choose a color, shape that speaks to the bridge from your first action to the second one, and feel that impact. And that's what we'll do. And then the group can kind of mimic that. So does that feel clear to everybody? Hopefully. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so maybe we're okay. All right, so I guess we are going to go into some breakout rooms, and hopefully it will be a smooth process. All right. Okay, so I would love to hear from one or two people to just see how it felt to them to do that activity. Angelina.
Hi.
Hi.
You hear me? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. First I did it for myself because there was no partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I am amazed about the finding of the bridging
Mm.
because that was totally spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
I can fall it was easy just to express the present condition, and it was easy to imagine the desired condition,
Mm-hmm.
but finding the bridge intuitively and spontaneous, and that really brought depth into the present moment. So
Lovely. Yeah.
that was
Mm-hmm.
my experience. I'm
Yeah.
so grateful, so playful, and so easy.
Yes, that's what we're
Great.
here for. That's awesome. I'm glad you had that experience. Yes,
Yeah,
wonderful. Okay.
amazing. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. All right.
Hmm.
Thanks for sharing.
Hmm.
Kathleen.
Yeah, I mean, what was interesting for me is I really felt how I felt in my body, like the tenseness. And it was interesting of when I wanted to go somewhere, it's like my body led, and so the movement came first and the words came second. And that was really interesting to observe the body leading. And then once I like repeated the gesture, the meaning of the gesture came later. And so that was
Mm-hmm.
nice to stay with the body to
Yeah.
understand the meaning behind it.
That's lovely. Yeah, that's lovely. I'm glad you had that experience today. Yeah. All right. Everybody's experiencing some spontaneity. All right. Let's do one more and then we'll move forward. June. Let me see if I can get your thing to where it
Hello.
keeps moving. Hello. There we
Oh,
go.
hi. was really, really nice. I felt such a warmth and gentleness in my group. And I think it was because of how lovely everyone is in it, but
Yeah.
also the mirroring exercise was really beautiful. It felt so validating to see what I was doing right away in these other women and for me to do the same for them. And it was just so nice. And we even had a little dance that we did at the end based on what we built, and it came totally organically. And it was like, oh yeah, this is what happens when you feel safe. You can find these opportunities to play with some things that we
Yes.
didn't expect. Really nice.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yes, it sounds like there was something about kind of the mirroring that created a safer container. So you weren't the only one being vulnerable in that moment. Everybody was sharing with you. So yeah, I'm glad you had that experience too. All right. So let's move forward because I know we're gonna run out of time. um, all right. Um, sorry, my slide. So we would conceptualize a condition perpetuated through the disconnection from healthy spontaneity. PTSD, like other psychosocial issues, could be described by Moreno as being characterized by an absence of spontaneity. Sorry. Immobilization or reenactment replaces that, or the presence of pathological spontaneity, novel but inadequate action. So just giving you a sense, this is from psychodrama theory. Okay. So, we know, I'm not sure how much people know about EMDR, but I know a lot of people have heard of it, and I know everybody's been going through this day long, so they may have a lot of information. So I'm not going to go too far into what EMDR is. But I will say that it is highly researched for PTSD, but it was originally studied for single incident PTSD. And there are some limitations there with EMDR and complex PTSD. We have some research that's still kind of it's kind of lacking around EMDR and complex PTSD. There's just not a lot of research, but a lot of clinicians, including myself, say that, just doing the basic standard protocol is just not enough for people who, their memory system is so extensive because of years of living in trauma. Um, so yeah. So EMDR, just making sure people understand that EMDR works according to memory consolidation theory, that it helps the emotional memory kind of go into long-term storage instead of being just kind of trapped in the emotional memory of the amygdala. So what I notice when people who have gone through the process feel like relieved of the trauma, they might say, oh, it feels like it just kind of happened. It doesn't feel like as heavy or intense as it did before. Um, so, that's what happens when things work well with with EMDR. But we have to add in other resources because there are certain elements you need in order to make EMDR work. So we're going to skip this one because we're running out of time. But so one of the things that we need in EMDR processing in order to process, if not, we may not make much progress, is we need dual awareness. A person has to be able to be present in the room and be able to look at the past at the same time. If they go 2 feet in the memory instead of 1 foot in the memory, then we kind of lose all of their resourcing of the present. The present is a resource for people who've been through trauma. The actual present, not, kind of the present of everything looks scary, but the actual, like, what is happening right now. So that's a skill that needs to be developed before any memory work can happen. Now, in EMDR, there is a phase, there are phases before you do deep trauma work, and that's preparation. So these are things that we would develop in preparation before we do any memory work. So, window of tolerance is another thing. I know a lot of people have heard of that. And basically, it's just making sure that the person can hold the feeling. If they can't, they either go into that fight, flight, freeze, or they go into that kind of submit dorsal response, then they're no longer doing EMDR processing. They are actually um, overwhelming their system. And so we don't want to keep going if we're trying to work on a memory and they're kind of outside of their window of tolerance. Big feelings are good as long as it's within their window of tolerance. Outside of that, then we start re-traumatizing. Also, authentic consent. So what can be challenging with complex PTSD is that sometimes there can be a fawn response because of interpersonal challenges that they had in their parental relationships. So sometimes people will say yes because they don't want to disappoint the therapist. They don't want to um, rock the boat or do something wrong, and that's not true consent for EMDR. So we have to kind of make sure they really are ready and they really are wanting to engage the process, or they're at a point of preparedness for this, and authentic consent. So trust within the therapeutic relationship is another thing, because again, sometimes if someone is doing EMDR and they think, oh, I'm supposed to feel better, so I can just tell the therapist, yeah, I feel better, that can be not great in terms of trying to process memories. We really need to establish a sense of trust and honesty in the relationship so that the client trusts that, okay, it's okay if you're here and it's okay if you're there, and so there's an accepting of the whole thing. So, and then safety, to build a sense of safety. A lot of people who have complex PTSD, just the world doesn't feel safe. There are times when I'm with some of my clients and, they will be in their own space doing telehealth. Everything, they live alone, they have their dog there, and they will say nothing feels safe right now. And so that perception from that implicit memory can be really strong. And to be able to kind of be able to kind of see what's the implicit memory and what is actually happening so they can connect to that sense of safety, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. Psychodrama elements that build skills necessary for EMDR. So there are some things that people can do with psychodrama that can be really good. And, as we're doing this, I am not saying that at the end of this, go implement psychodrama into your practice. If you are interested, there's a lot of great trainings out there to, learn more about this. But there are there's some really important even research about how psychodrama has been very helpful for people with complex PTSD. So body doubling, it's a way, when a person does a body double. So there is a psychodrama, which is kind of like a stage where people can lay out whatever is in their mind to lay out. It's like a surplus reality. Anything that they want to happen can happen there. And so you would have a protagonist, someone who's like, this is what I want to put on this stage. The director would be the facilitator, like the therapist. And the protagonist might choose a body double, meaning someone who kind of, when they feel frozen, speaks for them, but they trust this person. So it can help to kind of balance out, when there's a part of them that's really angry, the body double is saying, I'm so angry I could scream, even though the person may only say, okay, that's okay. So you can play all of that out and see these different parts that may be at odds with each other, negotiating right on the stage. It's really cool. All right. So observing, no. Okay. I'm looking at time and I'm checking to see. Okay. So I know we are running out of time. So, becoming an agent of change. Um, what's really important about that is that people can make decisions, they can choose, they can feel empowered when they're in this. So that is part of this too. Okay. All right, so what we were going to do, but I think we might only have, what, 10 more minutes left, so we may not be able to do this, is actually do a psychodrama. And psychodrama would have been really cool to lay out. And I thought about having the brain in action and having people play a role. And, maybe if we have a little bit of time, people can, chime in if they want to play a role. But just to kind of see how the brain interacts with each other. And what's great about doing a psychodrama is that you would have the protagonist, which is the person who's like, this is my brain, right? I want to show it outside. And then you might have a double who might speak for the protagonist when the protagonist struggles. And then there might be this auxiliary roles, and it can be anything. So you can have resources can come in, goddesses can come in, animals can come in. You can have your nervous system, like, the neurotransmitters running around the room. People can play these roles and people can see it laid out. I actually participate in a psychodrama group as well as run a group. And I remember one time I did map out my brain on psychodrama. It was amazing. It was so cool. And then I could add whatever resources to help it kind of talk to each other. Yeah, so that is an option. Okay, so this is the stages of recovery that are recommended by Judith Herman in terms of trauma recovery. So establishing safety and stabilization, and then remembrance and mourning. Oops. And sorry, it's hard for me to see the bottom of my screen. There's so many boxes. And then connection and integration. And I thought I might put it in here because I think with complex PTSD, there might be a longer period of establishing safety and stabilization, which really fits with the model of change that psychodrama Moreno kind of drew out with that canon of creativity. And maybe having more time to warm up, before there might be kind of, okay, now I'm ready to address this thing in spontaneity. All right, so okay, so there's an importance to meaning making that's really present for EMDR. So long-lasting responses to trauma, not simply from the experience of fear and helplessness, but from our bodies, our bodies interpret these experiences. So I think that hopefully during the exercise, you all kind of felt what that was like, you know what I mean, to just experiment, with kind of how do you interpret your current experience? How do you shape it? How do you become present to it? So, all right. So the power of playfulness. So modern memory research is clarifying that the painful edge of effectively negative memories may be dulled substantially if they are followed by intensification of positive feelings, including the positive effective aspects of supportive therapeutic environments. So, for instance, if therapists are able to evoke positive, even playful feelings, there's a reasonable chance that the subsequent memory consolidation process will carry along the positive, effective elements, therefore dulling the aches of painful memories. So I thought that might be important to add in here, because I think the playfulness that we can add is again seeing if in our own nervous systems as clinicians we can access a little bit of our ventral, and it can be a little contagious sometimes, if we catch it in the right moment. Okay, the container of play. What's wonderful about play, and I'm thinking about psychodrama, but I also used to practice play therapy as well. And what's great about both of these things is that you can stop or pause it. You can add resources. You can, add, as you deal with the conflicts, there could be bubbles of safety or actual blowing bubbles. I love that. Resources can enter and intervene at any time. And then people can be in spontaneity. It's a little easier because there's safety there, there's a container there. Um, you know, one of the things I love is group therapy because other people are doing it with you, and it can really strengthen that sense of okayness as you do some healthy risk-taking experimentation. There are lots of benefits of group therapy and for complex PTSD, being witnessed by others. We talked about mutual aid, and I think that one of the people earlier was talking about how marginalized individuals having a space where there are other people who've gone through something similar who can relate in identities can be hugely powerful for healing, especially when people have complex PTSD on top of that. It can create a lot of safety. Um, so mutual aid model is sharing information, all in the same boat, safe expression, being able to talk about taboo topics, because there might be, safety there. Um, and I think there's a container for, transference, so that the transference that happens is being held within the group, not just the individual therapist, which means there might be a really conscious way to work through it. And not to say it couldn't be conscious with individual therapy, but there is a power dynamic that we have as clinicians, even when we're very clear about not wanting one. So it can be helpful to talk to other group members, so that it doesn't feel like that's part of the dynamic. Um, okay. So I just wanted to stop and check in and see if there are any questions, comments.
Yeah, we have, oh, I think I'm echoing. We have a couple of questions in the
Mhm.
Q&A box. We have one that has 10 upvotes from Madeline.
Okay.
And the question is, what if someone's brain has physically changed a shrinkage amygdala due to PTSD from complex trauma? Can the effects of this be reversed?
So, as far as I understand, we all have neuroplasticity, and there can be improvements in terms of whether the size of these areas of the brain, go back to a different size. I'm not sure, but there can be more activation. But we've definitely noticed as people go through their healing process, even with EMDR, they have brain scans to show that there has been improvement in brain activation in some of those areas when people do that work. And even I think some of that stays. But I'm not sure about the size of the brain, or those parts of the brain. Mhm.
Okay, we'll do one more and then we'll probably have to wrap up. This is from Gina. How does laughter therapy, yoga play into this, e.g., the EMDR process, rewiring of the brain and desensitizing difficult memories?
Okay, so I am not clear about formal laughter play or therapy, but I do know that there is some research that says that it can be really healing to do self-affirming laughter. There's certain types of humor that build, and certain that take away. So I think I read a study about how it can be really detrimental, like gallows humor for people who have been our first responders, they say can be actually a red flag for burnout. So it depends on the type of laughter, the type of humor that people are using. But, I encourage, laughter in my sessions. But I don't know much about laughter therapy or laugh yoga formally. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you so much. And it looks like someone posted into the chat that mindfulness practice have shown to affect the size of the amygdala. So there you go.
Okay, there we go.
So I think this is, unless if you have any more last minute slides you want to conclude.
Um, I think people can look through those on their own. But I think we do talk a little bit about the post-traumatic growth in here, so there's some information about that. And spontaneity, and one thing that in terms of the brain that's really cool fact about spontaneity is that they were found in research that when people are in that zone, it's the same as having a spiritual experience. So it can be a really powerful moment experience. So yeah, well, thank you all for joining, and I appreciated your participation and your patience. And, I look forward to hopefully seeing you at another talk.
And thank you, Karee. I love play. I think every time we can incorporate play into anything is can be quite fun and therapeutic, I believe. So thank you so much. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you back in 30 minutes. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Bye.